Hello and welcome back. This is our podcast, and I'm Heidi Lester. I'm a counsellor and psychotherapist, and welcome to We Are All Fine. It's episode 50, season 2. And today we are going to be talking about something that many people I know can carry really quite quietly for years without realising just how much it might have shaped them. And that is growing up with unemotional or emotionally unavailable parents, and how that early experience influences the way we connect, cope, and relate as adults. This episode is not about blaming your parents, and it's not about labelling anybody as bad or harmful, and it's definitely not about you getting stuck in the past. It's about understanding what you adapted to, how your nervous system has learned to survive emotionally, and how you can begin to maybe think about meeting yourself differently now for a more comfortable, stable life. Because many people don't identify or don't think of their childhood as traumatic, but they still feel disconnected, unsure of their own needs, or emotionally alone. And I think that matters. So make yourselves comfortable. We'll do a bit of a deep dive into what this might look like for you, and I'll see you after this.
This is We Are All Fine with Heidi Lester, counsellor and psychotherapist with over 25 years of experience. Join us as we unpack emotions, relationships, and mental health strategies to help you show up as your best self.
When parents are emotionally unavailable, it often doesn't look dramatic. There may have been food on the table, you might have had routines, structure, and maybe even love in some kind of practical sense. But emotional availability is about something more subtle. It's about being seen, soothed, responded to, and emotionally mirrored. And when that's missing, children can learn very early lessons, not through words, but in their nervous systems. Lessons like don't ask for too much, or I might need to handle this on my own, or my emotions will make people feel uncomfortable. Or you might have learned that closeness isn't always reliable or consistent, or stability comes and goes. It would have given you mixed messages. Now, these aren't conscious beliefs, they're embodied in patterns, and they often follow us quite carefully through childhood. I know as my years as a psychotherapist, many adults I've worked with would have grown up with unemotional parents, but on the surface they think they're fine, and they think that they're okay because childhood was fine, it was happy. But underneath, when you peel away a little bit more at what those emotions might be feeling, there's a disconnect underneath the I'm all fine, and they're going to struggle to identify their feelings. They're going to minimize their own needs, and they might highly become independent people, but feel quite lonely and isolated, and they're going to care very deeply about others, but will feel uncomfortable when that care is reciprocated or the compassion starts to come back their way. In here, in my counselling room, it shows up with people saying things like, I don't know what I need, or I'm not sure how to put my feelings into words. They struggle to articulate things, and there'll be a resistance, I'll feel silly if I ask for help, or definitely shame, and they'll shut down maybe around them when they notice their partners or their children becoming emotional, because they just don't know how to adapt or respond. And I hear a lot of people say, I don't trust others will always be there for me. So they take everything themselves on board. They'll look after themselves, all the practical stuff around. They'll find it really hard to ask for any kind of help. And I always normalize this by saying to my clients, they aren't personality flaws. You have adapted. These are what we call adaptions. Your nervous system has had to learn early on how to survive in an environment where emotional connection wasn't consistently available to you. Now, from a neuroscience perspective, this makes total sense. Children, we depend on adults, we depend on the caregivers, not just for the physical care, but for emotional care and regulation. We learn from them how to become bigger human beings. So when a child is upset, overwhelmed, or distressed, the parent's response helps regulate the child's nervous system. And over time, the child, you, me, would have internalized that process. But when those emotional responses were absent or dismissive or uncomfortable, the child will learn to have to regulate alone. They would have learned to survive. And that is going to lead to emotional self-sufficiency, which does look like strength, but often comes at one heck of a cost. Because regulation without connection can become emotionally isolating for us. And you're going to know as an adult, this will show up in your relationships. You're going to find closeness uncomfortable, even though you might crave that, or you're going to struggle to express yourself, your emotions clearly. You're going to feel anxious when others are too needy or need too much from you, because you're always going to be struggling to look after yourself. So taking on somebody else's needs is going to make you feel pretty uncomfortable. Or you're going to choose emotionally unavailable partners because that dynamic feels familiar. It tracks a pattern. You know where you're at with that. However uncomfortable it is and however unpleasant it might be, it's safe and it's familiar. Healing from emotional unavailability doesn't always mean confronting your parents or having to rehash every memory and stir up resentment, anger, whatever that might bring up for you. Healing, it happens, always happens in the present moment through self-awareness, regulation, and new emotional experiences. And one of the first steps to healing in the present is just really quite simple. Start noticing when you shut down, noticing when you minimize your feelings, and noticing when you become uncomfortable when people start to reach out and care for you. And don't judge yourself in those moments. Just notice. And if you want, you can just respond gently by what do I have to learn here? What is going on for me? And that question, that open question you're asking yourself, will open the door to compassion. Another core part, I believe, of healing is learning emotional literacy, something many of us were never taught. I know I wasn't. And that means learning to name our feelings, notice our body sensations, and connect those emotions to our needs. And you might start by just checking in with yourself once a day, morning, noon, whatever. What am I actually feeling right now? Just do that little bit of a check-in. Just hold yourself accountable. Take seconds. Not what should I be feeling right now? What do I feel? And if the answer is I don't know and you can't get to that, that's fine. That's okay. That in itself is actual information. Another part, I think is an important part of healing, is learning to tolerate emotional closeness. Now, do this gently. You don't have to suddenly become over-expressive or show too much vulnerability if it's not going to make you feel safe. Healing in the moment will happen through small, consistent moments of safe connection, either with yourself first, so start practicing, grounding yourself, making yourself feel safe, and then you can work to practice with other people. That might mean allowing someone to listen without fixing you, or accepting support without apologizing or over maximizing, or noticing when your body relaxes instead of bracing for those few moments. Now, this will teach your nervous system something really quite new, that I don't have to handle everything on my own anymore. And when you start to really build up an internal dialogue with yourself, you are going to naturally start to bring in some of your own boundaries. And they are really, really important when we are trying to care for our own nervous systems and learn to regulate ourselves. Many people from emotionally unavailable homes either have very rigid boundaries or very floppy ones. So healing will mean learning that boundaries don't push people away. They actually protect connection. You know where you are with a boundary. So you allowing yourself to need more time, or maybe just say, look, I'm not ready to talk right now, or I actually could just do with a bit of hug here, need reassurance. Those are you putting boundaries into place. Don't think they're demands. They're not. What you're doing here is just putting, this is what I need your help. And you're doing that with grace and confidence. And I'll share something personal here, because I know it's something I see over and over again in my room, is that when When we've realised our parents weren't emotionally available to us, or they couldn't meet us what we needed on that level in childhood, we often grieve that. And that grief, it's valid. Your parents may well be alive. This isn't about demonising them or blaming them. It's about grieving for something you didn't have with care and compassion. Those two things, they can exist at once. They may have done the best they could, your parents, but something important wasn't missing. You're allowed to sit with both of those realities, because allowing yourself to name, I think, that grief, I think, is hugely important to your healing process. And here's the takeaway so far from today's episode. Take this with you. Healing from unemotional parenting or unavailably emotional parents doesn't mean you need to become somebody else. It's the exact opposite. It's more about becoming you, the true, real, authentic version of yourself you were always meant to be. And in counselling, I use person-centered therapy, where we look at what the organismic self would have wanted, and we believe we strive towards that despite the environment. So if your environment wasn't warm or emotional back then, it doesn't mean you can't make it that way now and heal yourself. It's a gradual process. And I'm going to share something personal here, because this episode isn't just professional for me. It's actually hit me on quite a personal level too. My childhood was hard, really, really difficult. Both parents were largely absent and both completely emotionally unavailable. And for a long time, I didn't have the language to describe what that meant, how it hurt. I just knew that I learned very early on, too early, how I had to learn to manage on my own to survive. There wasn't any emotional attunement available to me. I don't believe my feelings were really truly noticed, explored, and they definitely were not held or respected. And like many children in that environment, and I've worked with thousands of people over the last 25 years, like them and maybe like you, I had to adapt and become self-reliant. I had to work out what my own needs were and meet the ones that weren't being met. And my God, did I get good at coping, too good actually sometimes. And from the outside, that may have looked like strength, and I still think some people see it as strength today, but I tell you what, it's not. In many ways, it really, really damaged me. But what I came to understand, I'm still working through this, I'll do it for the rest of my life, both in my therapy and through my years of counselling, is that adaptation, that I had to adapt, did come at a cost. I didn't grow up learning that my emotional needs mattered. I didn't grow up feeling safe, and I didn't grow up feeling I had people around me to support me when I needed to lean on them. So as an adult, even when that support became available to me, which it is now, I'm really grateful I've got support around me now. It took years for my nervous system to feel safe, because I never thought it was going to last. I always knew it was going to leave me. And this is why my self-sabotaging behaviour came in, because I always left people before they left me. I noticed how quickly I would have learned to have closed down emotionally and leave. There wasn't 3 strikes and you're out. I was gone. I've had to really be careful with that as an adult now, because otherwise I would lose people around me. I've had to learn, and I hope you can do this, to accept the vulnerability, to understand it was uncomfortable, but to know it didn't define me. And I want to be really clear here. Healing didn't come from blaming my parents. I don't hate them. I don't blame them. They did what they did with what they had. I had to name what it was, own it, take it to a therapist, took it to friends. I'm still working on it now. I do journal. I do think about it. I work with it. I use it in my therapeutic practice, and I grieved, like I said a few moments ago. I often do. I can often get spiked into grieving for the parents I didn't have and the childhood I would have given my left arm for. But acknowledging it didn't make me weak. It actually freed me, because once I understood what my patterns of behaviour were, it made total sense to me. I stopped seeing myself as somebody who was damaged and broken and flawed, because I'm not that person. And I started seeing myself as somebody who can adapt quite well, actually. And to the environments around me. I now tune in, dial in, drill in, and I can now meet my own emotional needs. Not all the time, but a good 90% of the time. And that's the difference, I suppose, in the personal and professional, isn't it? I know my own stuff well enough now to be able to bring it to my clients and work with it really safely. My healing might not look the same as yours. It looks very different to all of us. But no, it's happening. It's quiet, it's subtle, but it will happen. And checking in with yourself as you do, you'll soon get to realise you're going in the right direction. You don't need to erase the past. You don't need to pretend it didn't hurt, but learn slowly and with intention. I think the intention is really important. You can always give yourself gently what you didn't receive. And I want you to know, if any part of my story resonates here, it's not too late to build that relationship with yourself right now, right after you finish this podcast with me. So before we finish, I want to offer a gentle reflection. Just ask yourself this: when do I most often shut down emotionally? And what feels difficult for me to reach out and ask for? And lastly, what would it feel like to offer myself the understanding I once needed? If you could go back to that 6, 7, 8-year-old, 10-year-old version of yourself, what would they need and how would it feel giving it to them? No rush, just something you might want to whip back and revisit those 3 reflections, but I just want to leave you with something to think about and what we've talked about today. So thank you for spending your time with me. If this episode has touched a nerve or resonated, please, I'd love you to share it, but leave me a review or reach out and share your thoughts and your feelings about your own difficulties and journeys through life if you've had unemotionally available parents. This is a space for you to grow. You're welcome here every single week, so I'd love your feedback. It's Heidi, weareallfine@gmail.com. And next week, I'm going to be continuing this conversation by exploring how those early childhood adversity, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, we're going to look at how they would have shaped your emotional world. And I'm going to be looking at how we can rewrite your inner story. So if you've enjoyed this, you'll enjoy that episode. So until then, if you have time, pop over and say hello to me on all the usual social media platforms: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Heidi, weareallfine@gmail.com is your connection to me. So until next week, please be gentle with yourself. What you adapted to make sense at the time and now you're learning is just new ways of being. You have done a fantastic job. We are all flawed, insecure, nervous and emotional, but always remember, be yourself. You are no one else. Until next time, have a great, safe and self-compassionate filled week. Take care. Finally, some important takeaways. This podcast is for informational use only and should not be used as a substitution for professional advice or personal diagnosis. These opinions are personal and I do not guarantee the accuracy of such opinions or information. I am not intending to create a counselling relationship with you, and you should always consult a qualified mental health professional with any concerns.